Yo, yo, it's ODB back with another episode. This is episode 397. Thank you so much for everybody that continues to come here and consume the content, whether you're on YouTube or on one of the numerous podcast apps such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I can't thank you enough. So I appreciate all of the support. Want to give a huge shout out to Scrapin' the Coast, our title sponsor, SCRAPIN, thecoast.com for more information. Annually in the month of June, Biloxi, an amazing show in the Mini Truck Hall of Fame. Come on out and join OLP and so many other vendors every year in Biloxi. I've been hinting at shorter content, and I want to jump right into this episode. If you saw the thumbnail, you know that it's maybe not mini truck related, but I continue to tease and talk about going into other content, doing some deeper dives into the pop culture stuff, which is what I love so much. Whether it's TV, film, old school BMX, you name it, there's so much. And you can see if you're watching on YouTube, some of the stuff that surrounds me here in the ODB studio. It really, really, really is my passion, anything pop culture. At the time of this recording is October 15th, 2025. We're on the verge of the Back to the Future day, if you will, that, basically when Marty goes back in time. And unfortunately, I have to report that yesterday on October 14th, news broke that the legendary Drew Struzan passed away on October 3rd, 2025. Now, some of you may be listening to this going, hey, who is he talking about? Okay. Stick with me till the end of this because I can guarantee if I was a betting person, I'd be able to put money on and say that you have seen one of these films that he did the iconic artwork for. So I'm going to kind of break down ODB's top 10 Drew Struzan movie posters / projects in general. And I'm excited to talk about this. Now, the trivia with ODB this week, I'm going to go ahead and start with the drum roll. We're not doing Christmas Vacation drum roll where he plugs in the lights and of course nothing happens. But the drum roll is, I want to stop for a moment, right? So some of you are going to listen to this podcast. Before we start, think to yourself, do you know Drew Struzan? Do you know that name? And what's one film that you think of when you think of Drew Struzan in terms of the artwork that he did? Now, it's okay if you don't know one. It's fine, right? I love this pop culture stuff, and I followed his career a very long time. And I'll talk about who he was. Again, rest in peace. And I'll talk about a few other things. Now, Variety has an article titled Drew Struzan, renowned poster artist for Star Wars, Blade Runner, and Back to the Future, dies at 78. And it talks about Struzan's Instagram account, which is DREW, and then STRUZAN, released a statement announcing his death. It is with, quote, it is with a heavy heart that I must tell you that Drew Struzan has moved on from this world as of yesterday, October 13th. I feel it is important that you all know how many times he expressed to me the joy he felt knowing how much you appreciated his art. Read the statement from longtime collaborator Greg Arnowitz, I believe is how you pronounce it. And it's very sad. But the thing I will tell you is if you listen to this episode, again, from a pop culture perspective, I think you're going to really find that you might be scratching your head like, wow, I never knew that was the guy. I'll do a couple bonuses at the end and I'll talk about how you can learn more about Drew Struzan with a documentary that was made about him. So strap in. Let's jump in right now to ODB's top 10 Drew Struzan artworks, if you will. Right. And what I'm going to do is if you're on YouTube, I am going to flash these. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the lights off first as we get started here. If you're watching on YouTube, I am going to display on the video the different artworks and kind of what I'm talking about. That way it'll give you a little bit more insight and I think it's going to help. So if you're listening via an audio podcast, thank you. Do me a favor, please consume this as well on YouTube because it really helps out our channel. So number 10, I haven't seen this film in a very, very long time. It is beloved by a lot of people, although I'm not, this isn't my genre of films I usually will consume, but there is a movie called The Thing, okay? Many of you know about it, John Carpenter's The Thing. And I will tell you this, there is a thing about this movie poster. On nofilmschool.com, it says, with the caption, Struzan's art for John Carpenter's chilling sci-fi horror film is a masterpiece of suspense. We are afraid of the image on the poster, and it hints at the paranoia and terror within the movie without revealing the creature. And it's just such a cool movie poster with, the jacket on and the gloves and just the glow, if you will, kind of coming from behind or from where the face would be. So if you did not know, that is Drew Struzan's artwork, and that is my number 10 on this countdown. I also want to stop for a moment and say thank you so much to Southeast Mini Truckin' Nationals, also known as Mini Nats, every April in Maggie Valley, North Carolina. They just concluded their sister show, which was the All Truck Nationals, also in Maggie Valley, North Carolina. That's going to take place annually in October. But let's not forget that registration is currently open. Just Google Southeast Mini Truckin' Nationals. It'll get you on their main page. You want to make sure the information on the form is correct. You also want to make sure you upload images of your ride. Okay, number 9. All right. This was a film that when I was younger, I don't remember when I first watched it, but if you are a fan of Big Trouble in Little China, then you have seen a film, or if you've seen this film, you know of a film that has the famous Drew Struzan's artwork. Now, this is one of those iconic 80s posters to me. There's so many of them. Obviously, I'm counting down about 10, maybe a couple extra. But you've got Kurt Russell there. You've got, just the bridge in the background. You have the semi, and you just have like lots of pieces of of what's to come. And it's such a fun film from that era. Big Trouble in Little China, again, Kurt Russell. And this one came out in 1986. And Wikipedia says Kurt Russell plays hard-boiled truck driver Jack Burton, who gets caught in a bizarre conflict within and underneath San Francisco's Chinatown. An ancient Chinese prince and Chinatown crime lord have kidnapped a beautiful green-eyed woman, yada, yada, yada. I won't tell you much more from there, but it is such a cool film from that era. If you grew up like me, kind of an 80s kid, 90s kid, if you will, more than likely you know about this one, and that was Drew Struzan as well. Okay, next, this is going to be an album cover, all right? Drew Struzan was getting his start, and this was according to goldderby.com, was getting his start designing album covers for the likes of Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath. Struzan broke through with his first one-sheet for the 1975 Private Eye spoof film, The Blackbird, starring George Segal. It goes on to say, Alice Cooper, which I'm going to go ahead and show you here, this Welcome to My Nightmare LP album cover was, yes, done by Drew Struzan, which is super cool. And it kind of showed how early in his career, he was willing to kind of do different things, and album covers were just all the rage in that era. They're not maybe as special now as they used to be, but certainly Alice Cooper, tapping into Drew Struzan's mind to put together this iconic 70s Welcome to My Nightmare album cover, to me, is super cool. The funny thing is, my mother and I were talking a couple of times about Alice Cooper. I have this tradition now of playing School's Out for Summer. I did it for my son pretty much every year at the last day of school. I do it now for my niece, and my mom was telling me that when she was much younger, her dad definitely didn't like Alice Cooper. If you're a parent now and there's some things that maybe your kids are listening to or artists and you're kind of rolling your eyes, that's the way it was back in that era. Alex Cooper was just a wild guy, so to speak. And it's cool to look back and look at this album cover and go, wow, Drew Struzan did it. Of course, Black Sabbath, there's one as well. But Alice Cooper's always kind of sticks out in my mind as one of those early works, professional works, if you will, of the late Drew Struzan. Okay, next we're at number 7. And this one is a little crazy because Star Wars is one of the biggest franchises ever. Okay, when I was a child, we absolutely loved Star Wars. I'm more of a Back to the Future fan, so more on that in a moment. However, I will tell you, Star Wars is fantastic. I loved 4, 5, and 6. That was the original series. And then, of course, later on, those are re-released. And then you have, all of the other films and spinoffs, if you will. But you may not know this. Drew Struzan did not do the original movie poster for Star Wars. Okay. He did the artwork for the album that came out. So the Star Wars, LP album, if you will, cassette at that time. He did do that artwork, and I'm going to show that here. It's very iconic, and this is one of my favorites of all time. My understanding was, again, late 70s, they utilized Drew, and then from there, I believe episode 2 and on, they utilized him. Okay. But I'm going to flash this other part. So this kind of like number 7B on my list here. In the late 90s, I worked at a movie theater, and they re-released the original series of Star Wars at that time. And this is what is really driven into my mind. Like when I think of Star Wars, I was so young at the time. I always think of these posters. I mean, episode 4, which was confusing enough, the first one. I think it was re-released in 1997 when I was at the theaters. And what was cool is this is what I remember. Now, if I've got this correct, he didn't do the original. There were a couple of different posters originally for Star Wars, but with that being said, he did do the album when that was released, and this is super cool, and that's what I showed to you here just a moment ago. So that's number 7. Number 6, okay, this is one of the most beloved films of all time. There's a little kind of a cool backstory to it. Ironically, Drew Struzan did not do the original poster for this film. So circa 1994, I believe it was when it came out. This film did not do well at the box office, but it quickly became literally a classic upon home video release. Okay. So if you grew up in the era of the 90s, late 80s, home video was huge. Okay. Whether it was renting at the local store, or if you guys were ballers, your parents were going out and buying those VHSs pre-DVD era. Okay. The Shawshank Redemption is one of the greatest films of all time, hands down. It's a great friendship movie, just a great story. There's so many Easter eggs in it. I can't even break them all down. If you watch the deep dives on YouTube, this film is just totally insane, and so much with filmmaking. A lot of it's over my head, but this film, the original poster was more of the way I understand it, more of like a photographic poster. And I'm going to show that here. And it shows Andy kind of in the rain with his hands out. And that's a little bit of a nod to, what transpires with the story. Many of you have seen the film. If you haven't, stop everything you're doing and either watch it tonight or watch it this weekend. You can find it online. Okay. In all of the usual spots. Here's the crazy thing. I mentioned Castle Rock Entertainment comes out, I believe, in 94. It bombs at and I think some of it had to do with maybe the naming convention of it. That's a big thing with films. Okay, the Shawshank Redemption, it's like, okay, what are we getting into here? And the movie poster was kind of basic at the time. When it comes out on home video, it finds like an instant cult classic, and then it pretty much leaps over cult classic to instant classic film. And Drew Struzan did the 10th anniversary release, or excuse me, the artwork for the 10th anniversary release. That was key because if I recall correctly, the Shawshank Redemption was originally a 2 VHS, home video, if you will, and it's because it's such a long film, and that was kind of rare in that era. Fast forward 10 years, mid 2000s, DVDs are all the rage, right? You have the studios that are doing the transfers, if you will, from the original 35 millimeter film and all of that stuff to kind of get a better picture, better sound, all of that. And we get Drew Struzan tapped to do that artwork. And I will tell you this, it took me a minute to find the original artwork, which I showed, but this Drew Struzan artwork to me is what's etched in my mind. Many of us don't even remember when it was in the movie theater because it was kind of a blink and you miss it, right? But by the time it became like a cult phenomenon and just a classic, it had already, it was kind of in the late VHS into the DVD era. So it was fantastic, in my opinion, that Drew Struzan was tapped to do the artwork. And to me, what he added in addition to Andy kind of holding his hands out, was just amazing. And this is the one that's really etched in my mind. So Drew Struzan, tip of the cap to the Shawshank Redemption. Again, just an amazing film. And if you like the film and you want to go down more stuff, there's tons of stuff on YouTube, like I said. So go check it out. All right. That's the top. That was 10 through 6. Let's go ahead and close this out with 5 through number 1 and a couple of bonuses. And then we'll wrap up this episode. Again, I can't thank you enough for continuing to watch. Okay. Next, at number 5, we have Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay. Here's the ironic thing. Again, late 70s into the 80s. Of course, I know this film is 1981. But basically, they had tapped a different individual to create the poster, the main poster for the US release of this film. So the poster that many of us have seen is not the Drew Struzan artwork. Okay. I am going to show you some here that is the Drew Struzan artwork, and this includes the wrap. They posted yesterday, Drew Struzan, the poster artist behind Star Wars, Blade Runner, The Thing, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future, and countless others, died on Tuesday due to complications from Alzheimer's disease. He was 78. There were, I think, a few other just variations throughout the world that were utilized, and this was one of them. So, although he's not credited with the US release poster, he does get credit with helping to launch that franchise as well. Again, he was at the infancy of Star Wars, Lucasfilm / Spielberg, Steven Spielberg with Amblin. They all tied together, and it's super awesome. So my number 5 is Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Drew Struzan poster, again, it's because I love those films, and at the same time, the artwork is so iconic. All right, number 4. Okay, this is a big one. And as a child, I can remember the first time that I watched this film, and it wasn't in the movies. It was actually at home when the back in the day, it was like a broadcast debut was like such a big thing. And when the broadcast came on, I watched it with my uncle, and that was First Blood. Just an amazing, awesome film. You have Sylvester Stallone, just a great illustration of him. And you've got the waterfall in the background. You've got the trees and all of that, kind of that outdoor look, if you will. And then it's Sylvester Stallone, First Blood. And it's just an iconic poster from that era. And I had to have this one on my list. This time he's fighting for his life. Just a great film. And if you love that film as much as I do, there's tons of fandom stuff, again, on YouTube. People that have figured out every spot. That little town is still there, and it kind of very much looks like it originally did in the film. So my number 4 is First Blood. Okay, number 3, one of the greatest films of all time. And this film set records. If I recall correctly, it became the biggest film of all time at that time. And Extraterrestrial, ET, was a cultural phenomenon. From the bicycle scenes in the early days of BMX, the kids like myself saw it. We wanted to go back and see it again. And Drew Struzan did an amazing job. Again, the relationship that he forged not only with George Lucas, but also with Steven Spielberg. Of course, Steven Spielberg directs this film. But if you look at the artwork, it's so iconic with the moon. You got Elliot, you got E.T., on the bike, if you will. You've got the fingers touching. And I believe they also tapped him. He did a bunch of other stuff too, I think, when the ride opened and whatnot. So there's a bunch of different things that he was able to do kind of with ET, if I remember correctly. Some stuff that looks like a first person view, like on the bike, that I always remember. ET is such a great film. I have it on LP. I have the, DVDs and things like that. And I even met a few years back Bob Harrow. And at the time, I never clicked. I knew that he was a little bit tied to the film, but there's a cool story out there if you Google Bob Harrow E.T., and it talks about how he was, I think, the only bike rider, stunt rider that was credited in the film. And he was kind of the lead there on set, and he provided a bunch of behind the scenes photos, and that was kind of cool. But E.T. Extraterrestrial, just a fantastic film. I know it's not everybody's favorite film, but when I look back and I think back to my the early days with the Reese's Pieces and the bicycle and just, everything in the house and the pizza, and it's Friday night, just such an awesome, awesome film. And eventually I want to get to some of those movie site locations. My number 3 is E.T. As Outcast would say, Extraterrestrial. Okay. All right, number 2. This one is easily my number 1. My number 1, number 2 are kind of back and forth, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But number 2, I've got The Goonies. The Goonies artwork is awesome. This was used on the LP. It was used on the movie poster, so many different spots. But what you may not know, Drew Struzan did this amazing artwork. And he also did different illustrations that they ran in the local newspapers throughout the country. And in those different illustrations, you had a different child that was at the top, if you will. So the order of the kids hanging from the stalactites changed, and that was super cool. It possibly maybe linked into, like, if somebody was like, well, hey, the oldest kid, Brand, he's at the top, and you'd see it, and then there was another kid, and who knows if that made kids go, hey, yeah, Chunk, he's at the top. I want to go see it again. I don't really know what the marketing scheme was there, but I think it's super cool that they did that. And again, an era way before computers, if you will, in terms of just overall daily use. That would have been cool to see. Struzan, rest in peace, had shared some of that in the past via his social platforms, but the Goonies is fantastic. Now, I will tell you this, there is another piece of Goonies artwork that came out on the clamshell VHS, okay? And I think there was like an alternate poster maybe in different regions, but if I recall correctly, that was a Japanese artist, okay? And Drew Struzan was always very big on making sure the artist got credit. For a while there on his social medias, Twitter, which became X, Instagram, I'm guessing Facebook as well, and possibly others, he would do this little game. He would post an image and say, is this one I did? And then if it wasn't, and people said, yes or no, then he would say, it's not one I did. This is who did it. So he always wanted to make sure that they got credit, which was amazing. Obviously, he's an artist. He wants to get credit as well. But the clamshell for the VHS and some of those other pieces of artwork that you'll see that are used in different regions and things like that, that was not his, but the kids hanging from the stalactites, that was. And it's very, very iconic. If you love the Goonies, you love the artwork. Okay, and number one, let's do a drum roll. Let's plug the lights in. Number one, I think most of you can guess by now, actually Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so Drew Struzan does an amazing job on Back to the Future 1. I think it helps to solidify the movie as classic with Marty with the door open, just so awesome. And then, oh, by the way, part 2, you've got Doc and Marty, and then part 3, you've got the different variations of the DeLorean. It just really put the stamp on that trilogy. And to me, it's my favorite trilogy of all time. That's never going to change. I absolutely love it. I love that they stopped the Bobs, if you will, stopped at number 3. They said, hey, over our dead body, or there'll ever be another Back to the Future. Now, we kind of got Back to the Future 4 through the ride, believe it or not. Some people kind of spin it that way, but this artwork is awesome. Now, the other thing that Drew did a great job, in my opinion, is over the years, he would share a bunch of the alternate stuff. He would share some of the early concepts, and some of that made it out. Like, for instance, if I move here, if you're watching on YouTube, let me see if I can do this right. Like Mondo, for instance, here, they released the LP with like a little bit different artwork, right? And I think they utilized some of Drew Struzan's stuff. Maybe they just redid what they would have done in that time. But the bottom line is, Back to the Future, the artwork is so iconic, and that carried over to part 2. It carried over to part 3. And ironically, I've said this before, Back to the Future and the Goonies share the same fandom timeline. There's somebody that kind of did a deep dive. If you look at there's a scene in the Goonies, and if you look at the calendar, and see what day it is, if you look at the newspaper, you kind of figure out, wow, that's like literally the same week that Marty is going back to the future, in October of 85, which is super cool. Of course, those films came out before then. So it was kind of like, wow, I'm seeing this before, it even takes place kind of in the movie world. But 2 amazing films, of course, under the Amblin, Steven Spielberg's production company, and pretty cool stuff. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple bonuses. I'm going to keep this quick. Now, the first bonus is, if you haven't seen the documentary about Drew Struzan, it's called The Man Behind the Poster. It came out in 2013. I believe you can watch it on YouTube. I watched it on Amazon Prime Video in the past. It is amazing. They talk about, I mean, he's involved with it. They talk about his career, how he got to where he's at. To me, one of the most talented artists ever of our era. It was even cool to see Craig Frazier, a friend of ours. He's been on the podcast many times, from Cal Concepts / Air Syndicate. Craig did a drawing of Drew, and he commented on his passing and just said, hey, he was an inspiration. And I think he even got to spend some time with him or talk to him at least, which is super cool. Now, my 2 bonus, right? Before I say my 2 bonus, I want to say this. If you now were like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, I know that guy. He did tons of cool pieces of art for these different films. Let me know what your favorite one is. Like, for instance, I think I just remembered, and I should know this off the top of my head, I think he did Adventures in Babysitting, and that one really should be on my list. I love that film. But comment however you comment. If you're on YouTube, please comment there. Let me know what your favorite is. Maybe just out of these top 10 that I've shared with you. My 2 bonus are, number 1, Cannonball Run. Cannonball Run has a ton of cameos. The artwork is awesome. And it's one of his early professional works, as far as I understand, right? If you think about when the film came out. Unfortunately, Cannonball Run is like virtually nowhere online. You can't buy it. I don't think you could buy it through iTunes, Apple Movies. You can't stream it seemingly anywhere. Sometimes you can find Cannonball Run 2. It's not the same. Cannonball Run was was directed by Hal Needham, the Canadian stunt man who wrote a book, but he also went on to direct the movie Rat, right? 1986 cult classic. Rest in peace to Hal Needham. So again, Drew Struzan did the Cannonball Run artwork. Last but not least on my bonus is Police Academy. Absolutely love this franchise. My understanding was they were looking to reboot it several years back. And I think with COVID, that derailed that potential reboot. Many of you probably can't even think of all of I believe there's seven. Believe it or not, there's seven. It's kind of a guilty pleasure film for me because I love just that era of films. And when I think back, I believe Drew Struzan did most, if not all, of the movie posters. One of my favorites is Police Academy 4. And this is so cool because you've got the helium balloon, you've got the basket, you've got all the characters kind of there hanging on, you got the bird flying in. It just was like super cool artwork that made you go, wow, I want to go see that. So with that being said, that is ODB's top 10 of Drew Struzan's professional works, my top 10. Love to hear from you. Do you agree with some of these? Do you think, are there others that come to mind? Maybe you've never watched this channel and you're like, yo, Jay, you totally missed, AKA ODB, you totally missed all these other ones. I totally get it. These are the ones off the top of my head. I did a couple quick fact checks to make sure I had stuff right. I appreciate all the support. Thank you to Scraping the Coast for the continued support. Thank you to Phoenix Forged Wheels. If you've got a lifted truck lowered in the future, you can go to Phoenix Forged on Instagram. It's FENIX Forged, and you can hit up Kennedy and team and let them know what you're looking to do. We're hoping that they're going to launch the mini truck wheels. They did these really cool spinning necklaces for us over here, Billet, which are our awards for OLP. With that being said, I don't think I have anything else to share. All I've got to say is rest in peace, Drew Struzan, and stay on the rise, everyone. ODB, we out, you. Peace.